Good afternoon, everyone. We continue our study in the book of Deuteronomy, and we are at chapter 28. We continue with verse 15, but just by way of review, what we have done is that in the first 14 verses, we have tackled the do's. Do's meaning things that they ought to do. Now, in the next series of verses, from 15 to 68, so we have the do's and then we have the don'ts. And here we find that when you do, there are blessings. And then if you don't do these things, and then you'll be curses. Now, it will be interesting for us to actually understand how these two work together. You need to realize that they are all part and parcel of one, right? It's one major set of instructions. So understand this. If you do, you have blessings. And as in normal situation, you find that if you do this, you'll be blessed with certain things. You need to also read the same 14 verses that if you don't, you won't get the blessings. In fact, if you don't get the blessings, it's like a little curse, isn't it? Then you find that if you don't do certain things, then there will be a set of curses. Now, this is a very broad stroke. All the curses that God will bring upon his people. But it also means that obey, if you obey, then the curses will not happen. And if the curses will not happen, then it's good. And so the entire chunk of 68 verses in this chapter is not primarily about blessings and cursings. It is about obedience. That if they actually follow what God tells them to do, it's good all the way. And if they don't obey or follow what God instructs, then it's bad all the way. Now, again, by way of review, I wanted us to also realize the words bless and curse. If you see this, here will be curses, and then we have blessings earlier on. When humans bless and curse, they are merely words that conjure good things as blessings or derogatory and defamatory and bad words will become curses. And these are all wishful thinking that you say bad things about others. But when God puts these things before his people, then blessings is what God can and will do or withhold. And curses are what God will do or withhold, depending on the conditions. And that would be the background as we move into verse 15 onwards. Take a look at verse 15. And it will be that if, it's a big if you do not obey the voice of the Lord your God. So obey is to hear. And then it says to observe carefully all his commandments and statutes. Also realize this. To observe is to keep. Sorry. To observe in the translation is to do, and carefully is to guard or to keep. To be careful, to do all of God's commandments and statutes, how to do it, when to do it, who to do it, which I command you today. All of these command you today is verbal. Always remember when Moses gave the commandments and he says, which I command you today, these are all verbal, they are not written. What we have here is what was decided by God to be put into writing, which means that there's a whole lot more that was verbally stated that we won't be able to read today. And God says that all of these curses will come upon you and overtake you. What does that mean? If this is you, then it will come upon you, right? Come upon you. And then to overtake you literally means to take hold of you, right? To take hold of you very securely, to hang on to you. But curses hanging on to you is not what you want. Blessings is what you want. And so that's the idea of overtake and come upon you. And these would be the A and the B. It's saying the same thing, right? Saying the same thing. This one is also the A and the B. To obey means to observe carefully. The voice of the Lord is verbal as Moses speaks it because he heard it from God, all his commandments and statutes. And so I just want us to be very clear. This is the condition. If you don't obey, see, this word is don't. If you don't do this, then curses will happen. And these curses is a whole list. So remember, the idea of curse in this case is to say bad things, but not only bad things because God is saying it. It will happen to these people if they do not obey what God has said. And so it is so important that the Israelites, as being described in this chapter, is to obey God to do the first 14 and to obey God to be careful to do what God has said. So it is actually said in the negative if you don't obey or if you obey, basically they are saying the same thing. So the first 14 verses is presented in a more positive perspective. In the next many verses, starting from verse 15, it is presented in a negative fashion. But basically, it's the same. If you obey, it will be fine. If you don't obey, the curses are spelled out. Cursed shall you be in the city, in the place where you all congregate, there, where you have your trades, where you live peacefully in walled places. Cursed shall you be in the country when you're out there, not in the town itself. Cursed shall your basket and your kneading bowl. Your basket would be where you would collect all the produce. Your kneading bowl is where you would make your bread. Cursed shall be the fruit of your body. That would be children that you bear. Cursed shall be. Now, that's a bad thing to say, isn't it? And in the Eastern concept, when somebody curses the womb, it's bad. And so it's if you want God to bless that you have more children, obey God. If you want God to curse your fruit of your body, as you produce them, you get fewer and fewer, then just don't obey God. The produce of your hand, where you plow, you have your agriculture, you have your cattle, the offspring of your flocks, all these are fruit of your own body, your land, your cattle, your flocks. This means that it will be fewer and fewer. Curse shall you be when you come in, and cursed shall you be when you go out. In the Hebrew, this means that when you come in to the world, and cursed shall you be when you go out from the world. And if you happen to be born in exile, that would be bad, right? These are some of the thinking. It will be blessed if you are in a land where it's flowing with milk and honey and everybody is joyful. But if you don't obey what God has instructed, everything that He has instructed, not some, everything, then be prepared to have a series of bad situations. The Lord God will send on you cursings, confusions, rebuke in all that you set your hand to do. Whatever you do in terms of construction, in terms of planting, in terms of raising children, in terms of raising flock, until you are destroyed. Now, verse 20 says that until you are destroyed, literally means that you are annihilated or exterminated. This is the word. If you don't want to be exterminated, if you don't want the 12 tribes to disappear, then you better obey God. And then until you perish quickly, this is an A and a B, right? Extermination and perish is about the same thing. God will do this because of the wickedness of your doings, which you have forsaken me. So, wickedness here is Ra, things that is evil. What is evil? When you forsake God, when you leave God. That's how straight it is. God is just saying it without mincing words. The Lord will make the plague cling to you until He has consumed you from the land which you are going to possess. In verse 21, we talk about the plague. The plague is really pestilence. Now, we don't see pestilence in our place. Pestilence means certain diseases that's going to affect the crops or affect the cattle. It will cling to you. This one would be to cling. The woman shall cleave to the man, right? It will stick to you. And then until he has consumed you, this word consume you is completed its process. From the land here is the Adamah, the soil, which you are going to possess. And so these are not good things. This is evil in the sight of the Israelites. It says the Lord will strike you, will slay you with consumption. The idea of consumption here is something that will waste as disease, waste in disease. And this kind of disease will give you fever in heat. And with inflammation, the idea of inflammation here is burning fever. Right? With burning fever, inflammation, with fever, with burning fever, these are all the same thing. This is a disease. That's an A, that's a B, that's a C, and that's a D. Just talking about the same thing. And then with the sword, with scorching and with mildew, this would be the, how should we say? Uh, this would be the I guess we call it dew, right? Or moss, or these are all like greenish greenish moss. And these are all dangerous. These are all bad things, I would say. So you can think of it. Verse 21 and 22 is talking about bad things, wickedness in this case, that God is going to bring upon the Israelites, and they shall pursue you, chase you until you die. And your heavens, the skies over your head, shall be bronze. Means that there will be no rain. It's going to be hot. And the earth, which is under you, shall be iron, very hard to plant and grow things because it's hardened. The Lord will change the rain of your land to powder and dust. All you get is not moisture, all you get is dry dust. From heaven it shall come down on you until you are destroyed. All these are bad news for a nation who's dependent on rain for agriculture. So these are all punishments of sorts. If you don't obey, you're punished. So you see, God doesn't ignore his people when they disobey God. God will actually remind them through all these means. And in the eyes of the Israelites, there is evil. But in the eyes of God, it is right. This is the right thing to wake them up. Verse 25, the Lord will cause you to be defeated. You will go out one way and then you run 7 ways, and you shall become troublesome to all the kingdoms on earth. What is troublesome? Troublesome will be an object of terror. People are going to be scared of you because when they have you, there'll be more problems. Your carcasses shall be for food for all the birds of the air, the beasts of the earth. All these will mean that you will die in all the natural disasters in wars. The birds of the air will come and eat you up. These will be scavengers, and no one shall frighten them away. The Lord will strike you with the boils of Egypt, with tumors, with scab, with itch, which you cannot be healed. These are all reminders that God can inflict on you. The Lord will strike you with madness, with blindness, with confusion of heart. Shall grope at noonday as a blind man gropes in the darkness. And so this will be the fact that you can be blind. You will not progress in your ways. You shall only be oppressed and plundered by other people, and no one shall save you. See, all these is bad news. If you don't obey, God will bring bad news on you. This is curses. And it's something that God can do. Verse 30, you betroth a wife, another man shall lie with her, because you will die early. You shall build a house, you shall not dwell in it, because you will lose in the war. You shall plant a vineyard, but you shall not gather its grapes, because you lose, and somebody else will eat the fruits. Your ox shall be slaughtered before your eyes, but you shall not eat of it. Your donkey violently taken before you. You shall not be restored. Even they come, they will take away. This is not just mere stealing. They are trying to grab everything from you. They are your enemies. Your sheep will be given to your enemies, and you will have no one to rescue them. Your sons and daughters shall be given to another people, meaning non-Israelite, and I shall look and fail, longing for them all day long, meaning they are not coming back. There shall be no strength in your hand to fight to rescue them. A nation whom you have not known shall eat the fruit of your land, the produce of your labor. There will be another nation that will occupy your land. They shall be oppressed and crushed continually. You will not see peace. You shall be driven mad because of the sight which you see with your eyes. It's incredible. God is not listening. The Lord will strike you in the knees and on the legs with severe boils which cannot be healed, from the sole of your foot to the top of your head. Basically, you will have trouble on all sides. Verse 36, the Lord will bring you and the king whom You set over you to a nation which neither you nor your fathers have known. Read this as the Assyrians, read this as the Babylonians, and and there you shall serve other gods, wood and stone, especially with the Assyrians. Then you shall become a shock, a proverb, a byword among all nations where the Lord will drive you up. They will say, if you look at them, it will shock you. They will be a proverb and a byword. If you want to refer to something that is disobedient and bewilderment, then they will talk about Israel. Look at Israel. Their God has driven you out of the land. They have no need to deserve the blessings of God. And when you disobey God, all the bad things that you cannot imagine will happen to you. You shall carry much seed. You go out and sow, but you will harvest little. For the locusts will come and eat them up. You plant vineyards, you tend them, but you shall neither drink of the wine nor gather the grapes. Why? The worms shall eat them. You won't get good harvest. You have olive trees throughout your territory, but you shall not anoint them with oil. You can't get much oil for your olives to drop down and it will grow bad. You shall beget sons and daughters, but they shall not be yours. They will go into captivity. They will be taken into exile. You won't see them again, like how Daniel and his friends have gone far away. The locusts shall come, eat up all your greens and produce in your land. The foreigners who is among you shall rise higher and higher above you. They will become leaders, and you shall come lower and lower. You will serve them instead. He shall lend to you. You have no money, they can grow, but you shall not lend to him. You have no money. He shall be the head, and you shall be the tail. Instead of the earlier first 14 verses, you shall be the head, and they will be the tail. You see, the curse is the opposite. If you don't obey God, everything wrong will happen. Moreover, all these curses shall come upon you, pursue and overtake you, and hang on to you until you are destroyed, because you did not obey the voice of God to keep his commandments and statutes as he commands you. You see, all of this, because is the if. You do not obey to hear everything that is commanded verbally. So they have a lot more to keep of the commandments and statutes which he commanded. See, all these things is like verse 14. And it comes one full circle in verse 15. And there shall be upon you for a sign and a wonder, and on your descendants forever. What does this mean? So always remember, whenever it is a sign and a wonder, like in 46, you see this as a sign. Uh, a sign is ot. This is a mark, and it is visible. And then the second one is a wonder, also a sign. This would be a miracle, right? It is a symbol that is visible. And so you find that a sign and wonder is an A and a B. They are both talking about the same thing, that God is doing something that everyone can see, including their descendants. It will affect them too. What does that mean? It means this: it will come a day, if they disobey God, foreign armies will come and take over their land, take over their children, take them away. They won't see them coming back. It's all of these things, and these are scary words for Israel. They are not even in the land yet, and yet God has told them, if you don't obey me, mark my words, all of these things will happen to you. And we call them cursings. Because you did not serve the Lord your God with joy and gladness of heart for the abundance of everything. Now, this idea of 47, it says here, um, instead. I think instead is a better word. Verse 47. So let me just put it down. Because you did not, say instead, when you have all these good things, uh, you had decided not to serve the Lord your God. And it says here, not to do things for Him in joy and gladness. This is an A and a B. Both are talking about uh, gladness, joy, right? Gladness. The second word, which is translated gladness, means goodness of heart. Goodness of heart. So this word gladness is actually goodness. It's the tov. It is for the good of God because they now have everything and yet they didn't. So if you go back and read Deuteronomy chapter 8, verse 11 onwards, if they receive everything, they don't. God is now repeating it over and over again. He says, you shall serve your enemies that God will send against you, like the Assyrians, like the Babylonians, in hunger, in thirst, in nakedness, in need of everything because they're no longer in their land. He will put a yoke of iron on your neck until he has destroyed you. So all these yoke of iron is a burdensome thing until you're all destroyed. The Lord will bring a nation against you from afar, from the end of the earth, as the eagle flies, a nation whose language you will not understand, a nation of fierce countenance. You think about it as the Assyrians, which does not respect the elderly nor show favor to the young. All must die, and they shall eat the increase of your livestock, the produce of your land, until you have nothing left. They shall not leave you grain or new wine or oil, or the increase of your cattle or offspring until they have destroyed you. Think Assyrian, and then think of Babylon. They shall besiege you at all your gates, every city, until your high and fortified walls are destroyed, which you trust. You see, the idea of trust is to have confidence. Have confidence. In verse 52, uh, literally means to have confidence, but to trust in the Lord with all your heart. When you have confidence, it's because you can see. You can see high and fortified walls. You place confidence in them, and then God says, I am going to bring them in and besiege you, and you will lose. They will come down throughout all your land, and they shall besiege you at your gates, which the Lord has given you. All the many cities that you have to go and conquer. You shall eat the fruit of your body. This is interesting. You shall eat your own babies. It is besieged to a point where there's no food to eat, and this actually happened. The flesh of your sons and your daughters, whom the Lord has given you, as fruit of your womb, in the siege and desperate straits which your enemies shall distress you, shall keep you close and pressure you. The sensitive and very refined man from among you will be hostile towards his brother, towards the wife of his bosom, towards the rest of his children, whom he leaves behind, that he will not give any of the flesh of the children whom he will eat, because he has nothing left in the siege, desperate straits in which your enemies shall distress you at your gates. All these are descriptions of the siege, of the siege. That they have no more food and they will eat their own flesh and blood. The tender and delicate women among you, These ones would refer to the ones who are pretty as women, who would not venture to set the sole of her foot on the ground because of her delicateness and sensitivity, will refuse to the husband of her bosom and to her son and her daughter. Her placenta, which comes out from between her feet, whom she bears, she will eat them for secretly lack of things to eat in the siege and desperate straits in which your enemy shall distress you at your gates. Same thing. The men will eat the children, the women will eat the newborn. And these are desperate times. It's not going to happen tomorrow, but God says one day it will. Again, warnings. If you do not carefully observe, means guard, to keep, to do all the words of this law. And the word law in 58 is Torah. And so it is actually said that are written in this book. So this one here is also written. Earlier is all verbal, that you may fear this glorious and awesome name, the Lord your God. What name is this? What name is this? The awesome name is Jehovah, your Elohim. So every time you read this, Jehovah, your Elohim, Jehovah, your Elohim, is a name. The entire phrase is a name. It's Jehovah, your Elohim. Then the Lord will bring upon you and your descendants incredible plagues, extraordinary plagues, great and prolonged plagues, serious and prolonged sicknesses, which you find, then this will be an A and this will be a B. And he will bring back on you all the diseases of Egypt, which you were afraid when they saw in Egypt. God says, look, I can bring it back on you and they will stick to you. Also, every sickness and every plague which is not written in this book of the law will the Lord bring upon you until you are destroyed. Now, this is a way of saying things, right? This is not written. This is are written. And so this is how the Hebrew or the Easterners would say the left hand and the right hand, written, not written, meaning you can't even imagine all the things that's going to happen. You shall be left few in number, the remnants, whereas you were as stars of the heaven in multitude, but because you won't obey the voice of the Lord your God, you will be small in number. And we call this the remnant. They were like stars of heaven, and then no more. And it shall be that just as the Lord rejoiced over you, good and multiply you, so the Lord will rejoice over you to destroy you and bring you to nothing, zero. And you shall be plucked off from the land which you go in to possess. You will be kicked out. So remember, God's land, God's rules. If you don't obey God's rules, then no land, no land. In our last segment, it says here, then 64 literally says, and then, right? And then Jehovah, the awesome name, will scatter you among all peoples from one end of the earth to the other, and there you shall serve other Elohim, which neither you nor your fathers have known, wood and stone. So if you don't listen to God, God doesn't care anymore. And this is going to be very bad. Now, in an Eastern culture, when a parent or a father says, I don't know you, you're not my son, these are serious and tormenting words. Now, in these last so many verses, God is saying, if you don't obey me, I really don't care. And among those nations, you find no rest, nor the sole of your foot a resting place. Why? Because none of the places belongs to them. There, the Lord will give you a trembling heart, failing eyes, and anguish of soul. This would be clearly an A and a B and a C. This will be terrible times that you can't sleep and you'll be having a nightmare. And your life shall hang in doubt before you. Will you live or die? You shall fear day and night. That day and night, somebody will come after you, and you have no assurance of life. Now, the idea of assurance of life means you can't be firm. Now, what does this mean? You have no faith in life. You cannot believe. You cannot have confidence. This comes from the word faith. Basically, you will fear, you are terrified because you don't know when you're going to die. Why? Because everywhere around you is uncertainty. God is telling them, you're about to go in, you're going to get your land, but if you don't listen to me, one of these days I'm going to kick you out. My land, my rules. If you don't repent, all these bad things are going to happen. And in the morning, you shall say, oh, that word evening. And at evening, you say, oh, that word morning, because of the fear which terrifies your heart, because of the sight which your eyes see. So if you look at this, this will be an A and a B. No assurance of life. When it's when morning, you hope that it's evening. When it's evening, you hope it's morning. Because you don't know when you're gonna die. You hope that you just keep going and that you don't see any of the trouble, but you do. It's always before you. Now, the final words here in verse 68 says, and the Lord will take you back to Egypt with ships. This is literally bounded slaves. And you will go back to slavery to listen to other people by the way of which I said to you, you shall never see it again. And there you shall be offered for sale to your enemies as male and female slaves, and no one will buy you. It's even worse. So you shall never see it again. Now, this it uh, is actually her. And this refers to the land. You shall never see the land again. And when you're over there, you will be sold as slaves. But guess what? Nobody wants you because they know that you are the Hebrew people. These are the final words. The final words that God said to them. God's land, God's rules. Although we see these and read this as curses, actually, there is only one rule. What is the rule? The rule is to obey Jehovah, your God, your Elohim. That's it. Actually, the statements here is as simple as a parent telling the child, go pick up your toys. There is no magic, no mystery in this entire chapter. It is not meant for us to take it apart, that we can take a few lines or take a few words. It comes in one chapter, in one chunk. If you obey, blessings. If you don't obey, curses. It's just as simple as that. There is the verbal commands, then there are the written commands. It appears to us that there is far more than what is written that the Israelites are to be careful to keep. And they are passed down from generation to generation. And it is about the land, God's people for the land. And it's not supposed to be taken like a Chinese menu. You know, a Chinese menu is when you can pick some and don't pick some. God's menu, or God's rules, as I call them here, it's everything, not some, not when you feel like it. It's all or nothing. And so, in God's mind, if you follow some and don't follow others, it's as good as not following. So, take into consideration what Saul did. And so, when God wants a man after his heart, it means that everything God instructs, he will do. And that would be blessings. If you don't, it will be cursings. And God is God. He can bring it to pass. And of course, when we read further down in the Bible, you find that they actually experience all of these things in chapter 28, the good times and the bad times. And it's conditional because God's land, God's rules. Don't follow, be prepared to be exterminated. And so God remembers David eventually, and that will come in 2 Samuel chapter 7. But now in Deuteronomy, it is an all blanket destruction. But come 2 Samuel 7, there will be a reprieve for the descendants of David. And thereby we find that, yes, the northern kingdom is destroyed, but the southern kingdom will return. But nevertheless, everything said in chapter 28 had taken place, and it is about the land. And with this, we come to the end of our session today, somewhat lengthy, but it is an eye opener that is referring to the Israelites because of the rule, God's land, God's rules. And God is showing his character here that he is not playing with the Israelites. He is a serious God. He is a just God. And what he says, he will do, both blessings and cursings. And with this, we hope that we are mindful of God's character, that what he tells us we must do.